This is A People's History of Kansas City. I'm Suzanne Hogan. So just east of Kansas City is the city of Independence, Missouri. A very historic town. Some of the things it's known for is being the starting point where the California, Oregon, and Santa Fe trails all began during westward expansion. It's also a sacred city to the Latter-day Saints movement, led by Joseph Smith, and still home to many denominations of the Latter-day Saints movement. And it's the hometown of the 33rd President of the United States of America, Harry S. Truman.
And I, as President, appreciate everything you've done. If everybody had a viewpoint about...
Actually, Truman was born in Lamar, Missouri, but Independence is the spot where his family established themselves. It's where Truman attended school and set roots after his presidency. Some remember Truman fondly as a guy who furthered the New Deal, worked in the mailroom of the Kansas City Star, and loved his hometown so much he returned to live in Independence after his presidency. As a president, he desegregated the military, passed the Fair Deal, and helped establish NATO. But there are also problematic and not so great ways that he's remembered. Like, he made the decision to drop the atomic bombs, seized control of the steel industry to prevent a strike, and entered the U.S. into the Korean War. Today, the name Truman literally dominates the landscape. From road names, schools, and small businesses, banners of his silhouette line the streets. But other parts of Harry S. Truman's legacy are less visible in his hometown. Across from the Truman Library and Museum in Independence sits McCoy Park, a beautiful green space. But few parkgoers know that directly below their feet is the rubble of what was once a vibrant black neighborhood. Today, not a single house stands from that neighborhood. As reporter Savannah Holly Bates reports, it was completely destroyed by urban renewal. But its former residents are still seeking justice to ensure their story is not forgotten.
Nancy Coppridge Harris grew up with her parents and 7 siblings at 512 West Nettleton in Independence, Missouri. They were residents of the Neck, the biggest black neighborhood in Independence that was settled in the early 1800s near the city square and populated largely by formerly enslaved people. Gardens and fruit trees lined the neighborhood. Neighbors shared the goods from those trees, like wine or pies that they had made, so no one went without.
We just was like a village. It was just like a village, and we cared for each other. We had midwives and nurses and doctors in our neighborhood, to come to our rescue because we couldn't go nowhere else.
Walter Jacobs Jr. was born at 912 North McCoy in the Neck, on the same street that his parents and grandparents were raised on. He always dreamed of building his own house on the same street. But in 1965, he was drafted to fight in the Vietnam War, and when he came back, he said it looked like a bomb had gone off. His house and the whole neighborhood were demolished.
I come back and everything was gone. I was going to build a house, but it was all gone. Everything was gone.
The entire Neck neighborhood was razed by urban renewal in the 1960s. By 1969, nearly 180 families were displaced. The city built a park on top of the debris, made up of more than a century of memories.
People didn't know where they were going to live and how they were going to survive because the monies that they were offered them for their homes wasn't even make a down payment on a house. And they lived there for all their lives and put all their heart and soul into their houses, and to get nothing out of it.
The story of the Neck mirrors that of hundreds of black neighborhoods that were wiped out in an attempt to reinvent American cities. The Neck was a place where kids would play baseball in the streets, there were fish fries every weekend, and everyone would catch crawdads in the creek that ran through it. Alongside all of that, though, was evidence of Independence's decades of neglect. In the late 1930s, the neighborhood was redlined and deemed hazardous. Property lines were drawn so that it was almost impossible to build large homes in the area. Multi-generational households were forced into small, cramped houses or scattered across several homes. Independence did not provide utilities like sewage or running water to the majority of homes in the Neck, so people used outhouses well into the 1960s. Alversia Brown Pettigrew lived at 500 West Nettleton with her mother, aunt, and uncle. Nettleton was one of the only paved roads in the area. Most didn't have curbs or storm drainage, so people would get together on her street in between hers and Nancy Coppridge Harris's house. At a reunion of former residents of the Neck last year, she reminisced about swimming with friends at a creek they called the Branch.
I remember at the edge of their yard, it was just like Niagara Falls there. They all had little bridges they made to go across to come over to the backyards on Nettleton. But that was just a flowing spring.
Though they didn't know it at the time, the city's sewage ran into the Branch, the same creek where they caught crawdads and swam in the summer. The beginning of the end of the tight-knit neighborhood came in 1957, when the Harry S. Truman Library was built right across the street from the Neck. Truman's home was just a few blocks south. When he was president, Truman signed the Housing Act into law.
Program, public housing, slum terms, and urban development.
The program gave cities money to raise blighted or slum neighborhoods under the guise of improved housing. Instead, urban renewal programs across the country displaced thousands of people from their homes. John Taylor is a historian who studied urban renewal in Independence. He believes the Truman Library was the cause of the Neck's demolition. Just a few years after the library was built, Independence designated the neighborhood for urban renewal and began making plans for its demolition.
They essentially said that these people and their past really didn't matter. We want to go develop or create another attraction for this space to complement maybe the library and the square. And that's pretty telling. It told me that these people were in the way of this kind of economic development.
But residents were determined to fight back. Walter's mother, Virginia Jacobs, led their efforts. They accused the Urban Renewal Board of offering less than the true value of their homes and discriminating against the Black residents being forced to move. Virginia led a march on the Independence Square, and on the 4th of July in 1966, she and 100 other demonstrators protested the urban renewal during Truman's speech at the library. Despite their efforts, they were still forced to move, leaving behind houses that they owned for generations, and losing hundreds of thousands of dollars of Black wealth. A few residents managed to find homes in Independence, but many struggled. The city was still segregated, and most white homeowners refused to sell to prospective Black buyers. Walter Jacobs tried to buy a house in Independence, but was unable to find one that would sell to him that he could afford. He had to move to Kansas City and didn't return to the site of the Neck for more than 50 years until he spoke to KCUR for this story.
It's something that's deep-rooted inside you. That's what I'm saying about moving back to Independence. At one time, I wanted to move back to Independence because that's all I knew was Independence. But I was treated so bad out here in Independence, I said I'd never come back.
Today, the bounds of the Neck are defined by McCoy Park. According to some reports, it was built directly on top of the debris from the bulldozed houses. The only nod to the neighborhood are two historical markers with a brief history of the Neck. Nancy Coppercharis doesn't think that's right.
Nothing about us other than the neck marker. It should have been something about us here. This property belonged to us other than the marker, you know.
Alversia Brown Pettigrew was instrumental in securing the historical markers about the Neck, and she doesn't shy away from all the pain urban renewal caused her and her neighbors. She also wrote a poem and book about her childhood there, titled Memories of a Neck Child, which she read at a group interview last year with KCUR.
And splitting Black families all over the land. We had to move out of the Neck like a flashing spark. Independence had to make way for the much-needed McCoy Park. Certainly the prices offered some were quite meager, but there was no choice, for the city was eager. Then the bulldozers rushed in, piling the Neck in a heap. Some folks shouted for joy, others would sit and weep. An all-American city was the plot of this story, leaving many Neck family deep in debt and full of worry.
Walter Jacobs Jr. thinks the city owes him and other residents reparations for the loss of wealth and the trauma their displacement caused. Each of the former residents continues to keep the memory of their old neighborhood alive in their own way, and each hopes that the legacy of the Neck won't be forgotten.
Savannah Holly Bates is KCUR's general assignment reporter. She grew up in Independence, where the history of the Neck isn't widely taught. The Truman Library still has yet to make an official comment on the neighborhood or its involvement in its destruction, but said it is planning a major redesign of the grounds. The changes will include a recognition of the Neck neighborhood and its former residents. The City of Independence said there have not been any conversations related to reparations or brought to council yet. At-large council member Bridget McCandless is working with the Parks Department on additional signage about the Neck. A People's History of Kansas City is a production from KCUR Studios. It's hosted by me, Suzanne Hogan. Our senior producer is Mackenzie Martin. This episode was reported and produced by Savannah Holly Bates, with editing by Lisa Rodriguez. It was mixed by Byron Love and Paris Norvell, with music from Blue Dot Sessions. And you heard archival audio of a 1952 housing conference from the Truman Library. If you have ideas for the show or just want to say hey, send us an email at peopleshistorykc@kcur.org. And thanks for all the support so far. If you're a fan of the show, rate us, write a review, or share our episodes with a friend. You might also like an episode we reported a few back, all about Hiram Young, a formerly enslaved entrepreneur in Independence, Missouri, who went on to become one of the richest men in the county. Okay, until next time, we've got some great episodes coming your way this summer. I'm Suzanne Hogan. Take care, and thanks for listening.